Hello, I'm Mark DeLuzio. Over the past century, our constitutional republic, grounded in the rule of law, has been transformed into a tyrannical democracy, orchestrated by unelected bureaucrats and globalists. The Constitution is now treated as a suggestion, not the law of the land. Welcome to the Constitution Solution, one podcast under God.
Hi, I'm Mark's co-host, Suzette Lawrence. Our intention is to explore the Constitution and discuss how our freedoms and constitutional rights are violated by those very politicians who took an oath on the Bible to uphold it. Learn how the Constitution is the solution to our country's problems. What do we need to do to restore our inalienable and enumerated rights? Class begins now.
Mark DeLuzio here for the Constitution Solution, one podcast under God. We're going to get going today on episode 16 and talk about Robert Welch. We'll let you know who he is in a minute if you don't already know. But we have an announcement to make. As you know, in the last episode 15, we had to say goodbye to Christy Tyrone. She had to kind of reprioritize some of her time and wasn't able to continue on the podcast. So we wish her the best, and we may have her back from time to time to do some things that she was passionate about doing when she was with us. And there's still some things on education and some other topics that are near and dear to her heart. And we will get her back, I'm sure, from time to time to do a guest appearance type of thing. So we're going to miss Christy. However, like Christy, I met on the campaign trail, and we became really good friends. She became a very good supporter of my run for Congress. So has this next young lady who I have in front of me, Suzette Lawrence, who I met on the campaign trail as well. And I met her up in Sedona, which is part of my district, a 63,000 square mile district. I think the biggest one in the country. And met her and was very impressed with her knowledge and her insights, and definitely a patriot and definitely a true constitutionalist. And I picked up the phone and called her and said, "Hey, Suzette, I'm looking for another partner here. And what do you think?" And what did you say, Suzette?
I said, well, let me think about it, Mark. And the reason was I was going through some big changes myself. And
Right.
I thought, I got to really think about whether I want to make a commitment to this, because so often when we have an opinion, we can't always back it up with facts. And in doing the podcast, I wanted to be really bulletproof in
Right.
how I would. So I knew it was going to take work, right? I know my background is in nursing. I was educated as a nurse, and I have a master's degree in nursing. I was a certified nurse midwife. And then I shifted about 25 years ago into wellness. And that had to do with, the Constitution and my ability to operate independently and freely. It was being impinged upon. So, this issue of freedom, liberty, personal responsibility, prosperity are all near and dear to all of us if we look into our lives and how we've been impacted by it. So I think in 2008, 2007, I campaigned for a year, diligently for Ron Paul, and learned a lot during that time, learned a lot about what I didn't know, and then learned, and just have continued since that time. So I'm very excited to be here, and I appreciate you inviting me to join you on this, Mark. But let's get into the podcast today.
By the way, Christy, I'm sorry, called you Christy.
Christy's not here.
Suzette.
Yes.
It's unfortunate that you have a medical background and a nursing background, because, all of the science that comes out, especially relative to COVID, we just take that at face value, right? And we just take all that science, and we believe in all the science here at the Constitution Solution, don't we?
I didn't believe any of it. And not a word.
I was just
And,
setting you up, that's all.
you know, if anyone's viewing, you'll see I have an autism framed
Right,
copy of an article I did for autism for this publication back in 2010, 2009. No, I'm, you know, the infringements on our liberty are coming from everywhere. And probably nothing is more personal than our health. So to have this Obamacare, for instance, probably one of the worst examples of healthcare that I can think of. I mean,
never mind that it's 100% unconstitutional, but
oh, it's not, well, it's
what they
nothing.
wanted to do, right.
Yeah, I mean, we're free people, you know, free people can make decisions for themselves, you know, they don't need an insurance company doing it.
Right, and we're gonna have a lot more to say. We just did the last two episodes with Christy, we did on the COVID hysteria and the infringements on our rights. But that is there's so much more to say about that, and I'm sure we're gonna come back with you and your viewpoint and expertise, because you and I have talked a lot about the medical side. I've learned an awful lot from you in terms of how you see things and how you think about it. But we'll come back on that one, because it's as you guys are going to find out, this whole thing is about a bigger plot called globalism. And if you go back to one of our previous episodes on Marxism and globalism, all this stuff kind of seems to tie together. So I'm really excited to have your perspective on that as we move forward. So shall we get going?
So we're talking about Robert Welch. Are we ready to start?
Yes, we are. Robert Welch.
So who was Robert Welch? Why is he so important, Mark?
Okay, well, this is episode 16, and we're calling this, Suzette, Was Robert Welch Right? Okay, let me just start out by saying that Robert Welch was the founder of the John Birch Society back in 1958. Okay.
So who was John Birch?
Well, I will get to that. John Birch is what he named this organization after. Well, let's talk about Mr. Welch first. Well,
Okay.
first of all, he was born on December 1st, 1899. And by the way, I was born on December 1st, not in 1899, just to let you know. And ironically, he died in 1985 on January 6th. And when I looked that up, I said to myself, wow, is that like an omen? January 6th? Okay, well, anyway, let's move on. You look him up, Suzette, in every article about it. He's a conspiracy theorist. He's a right winger. He's a racist. He's a this, that, and the other thing, right? All this stuff, all the classic stuff that you would expect on anybody who's pushing back against globalism and communism. And that's what he did, right? And he called this out early on. And I'll get into that in a minute. He graduated high school in North Carolina at age 10. The guy was brilliant. He went to University of North Carolina at age 12. Okay. Yeah. He started with his brother, or joined his brother, in a candy company. And some of the famous candies that he created out of that, and he made a lot of wealth out of this, was, remember Sugar Daddies?
Yes.
Pom-Poms and Junior Mints.
Junior Mints?
Yes. Yes, I love Junior.
You've got to tell Seinfeld.
Yeah, really.
Those are his favorite candies.
Well, and that, so he made his money out of that. So, and he called out the communists, and in particular, he pointed out Lenin had a 3-point plan. He was going to take over Europe, which basically they did, Asia, and then eventually the USA. Okay, and if you look at the transition of China over the course of time and how they came from nothing to what they are today, the Eastern European bloc, in terms of what went on there, the whole Hitler movement, the Stalin movement, so this is what's going on here. This is a long-term plan. You got to remember, communists work long-term. They're very patient. And this is what we're involved with now that we want to kind of expose. in our own government. Okay, he thought that Eisenhower and Truman were communist sympathizers. Okay, uh, he pointed out the
Interesting.
radical movements of Woodrow Wilson, and I know you and I have talked about this offline, and I think you said we're going to at least do one, if not two, episodes on Woody. I'm going to call him Woody because I have trouble saying Woodrow. Uh, and we already talked about Woodrow or Woody in our episode on the fourth branch of government and how he really started and set the platform for the tyranny that's going on today with all kinds of things, right? And I know you and I talked about it. You already did some research on Woody here, and we are going to have more episodes on him because he was such an instrumental player in terms of setting the framework for the demise of our country. So,
Well, and globalism, the world. I mean,
and global, yeah, exactly.
He's definitely in at the ground floor, whether he was a tool and manipulated or whether I don't think he was a mastermind. He wasn't that bright, but he loved adulation.
Well, he could have been bright. I mean, I know he had a PhD. He was president of Princeton, but that means nothing, right? And
no, it really doesn't, because he actually struggled in school. And when anyway, let's stick with Mr. Welch because
we'll there's a lot to say about him. As a matter of fact, there's so much to say about him and why we're going to spend so much time on him because of his influence that he had that we're still feeling today. Okay.
Yep.
As Robert Welch said, he started this nation. Wilson started this nation on its present road to totalitarianism, to communism, basically. And
yes.
and that was back in 1958 when he said that. Okay. Now, yeah, so that's the background on who Robert Welch was, and he started the John Birch Society, and I'll talk to you more about that in terms of how that happened. But
Mark, is it fair to say, so when we talk about communism,
yes,
and when I'm reading and in my research, collectivism, socialism, Nazis, globalists, fascism, Marxists, Fabians, all kind of fall into this category of collectivists. So everybody puts their own little fingerprint on it, on this idea, but they seem to be universally motivated by being included in a privileged class. They are just, they want this special privilege that they don't think they can have otherwise. So the collectivists are, I think, a good category, especially today, because every country you look at that has instituted one of these quasi-communist, socialistic kinds of governments have failed. The people are impoverished. They are poorer than they've ever been. And it was with free market capitalism that people came out of poverty. In our constitutional republic, I mean, which is why we were a magnet for the world, right? Everybody wanted to come here because they knew that they were working hard and they could enjoy a merit-based reward for their hard work.
Right. Well, all those that you mentioned, Suzette, in terms of fascism and communism, socialism, all those things, right? They're all different degrees of the same thing, control. Yeah. Okay. Control in the privileged class. I always tell people there will be winners in communism, but it won't be you. Okay. So they're all different. Fascism's a little bit different. They all have slightly different definitions in terms of what they really are. But when you take a step back, you're absolutely right. They all have the same common thread in terms of what they're all about, right?
Yes,
you can argue socialism is really the JV team on your way to the varsity team called communism, right?
That's what Dr. Paul taught. He said socialism is the bridge to communism.
That's right.
Period. So I mean, it's just a little further down the road.
Yeah, and this is and we're going to talk more about this as we get into this thing because What I'm going to do here is, first of all, talk a little bit about John Birch and why
Oh,
they
okay.
John Birch Society. John Birch was a U.S. Army military intelligence officer, and he got captured in China, and he was killed 10 days after World War II was over, okay, by the Chinese Communist Party, right? So there was a whole thing about him. We can probably go into his life. There's a lot about his life that we don't have time to talk about today. But Robert Welch felt that his organization would be called the John Birch Society in his honor and representative of what communism is really, all about. So that's how we looked at that.
So Robert Welch wrote the Blue Book. Tell us about the Blue Book and why it's so important.
Yeah, okay, so the Blue Book, by the way, if you don't have the Blue Book, go to johnbirchjbs.org. You can order it off their website, or you can get it on Amazon. But I've had the Blue Book now since, oh geez, I want to say the early 80s, Suzette. And every time I've read it, and I've highlighted it, the whole thing's almost highlighted now, because it's like, when you're in college, you're supposed to highlight the most important things. Well, the whole damn book is important.
Yeah,
Okay.
depending on at what phase of your study you're in, right?
Yeah,
All of
I'm
a
not
sudden,
kidding you.
something
Exactly.
when you're
Exactly.
rereading, things
Yep.
jump out at you and you're like, oh my gosh.
Well, what I had to do to prepare for this particular episode was buy another one, and and I sent you one, but you already ordered one. But there it is. Yep. And I highlighted it again. Okay, with the respect of I want to look for what Robert Welch was talking about back in 1958. So let's go back a little bit in time. In December of 1958, in Indianapolis, he assembled 11 other men to bring them together and talk about his concern about our country and the communist movement within our country. Okay. The Blue Book is the exact script he read to them at that meeting. It was a 2-day meeting. It was in some lady's house in Indianapolis. And I don't even think she was politically involved, but somehow they got into her house and used her house. And so he invited more than 11, Suzette. He invited, I think, I don't know what it was, 15 maybe, but 11 showed up. Okay. And there was Robert Welch as well. So it was 12. And the Blue Book is an actual word by word description of what he read to them over the course of 2 days. Okay. And then of course, they discussed it and all that. So that's what the Blue Book is. All right. Now, everybody called him a conspiracy theorist, right? They call them every, name in the book. And that's the way that the left discredits you when you come up with some kind of thing. I mean, how many conspiracy theories have come up over the course of time that have proven to be fact? I would say almost all of mine have.
Well, I would say that a lot of people, first of all, conspiracy theory is an actual phrase brought up, created by the CIA to discredit anyone that wasn't going along with the program.
There you go.
And their narrative. So they revert to character assassination, and most people do not want to be publicly humiliated or diminished. So they come to a point where they get in line. They are entrained, if you will, to go with the flow, to say what's acceptable, to use the acceptable language, But, we see it in kids in school today with their preferred pronouns, that kind of thing. And a lot of these kids, adults are not any different, So I think that the character assassination component of shaping a society is really huge. The peer pressure, we used to call it when I was younger. It was like the peer pressure. That was the big thing. Anyway.
Well, when they go after your character in an argument, you won because
exactly
they've got no facts. They've got no comeback on the substance of the argument itself, right? And that does happen. I mean, that is you just think about, you're a climate denier if you don't believe in climate change, okay, or man-made climate change, right? You're a climate denier,
right.
You're a a womanizer or whatever if you don't believe in abortion. So they attack you. Even here in Arizona, where they had the election audit, the press attacked the people who did the audit. They did not challenge the results of the audit. Okay,
Right.
very interesting, right? One of the guys they attacked, by the way, he invented email at the age of 14. Okay, he was a world-renowned signature expert. Okay, he invented email at age 14. He had more degrees than the Fahrenheit scale. Okay, and they attacked him. Okay, it's like, you gotta be kidding me. Well, wow.
Yeah, it's because they couldn't attack the argument. And, this is a classic tactic. It's a very low frequency thing to do. It's not something that someone with intellect would do. They would attack the argument, like, what's wrong with what you're saying? We know socialism leads to poverty and social degradation and, and a cultural vacuum, if you will.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, that's just how it is, that you can look any country in the world and you can see one phase of this and that fall into that collective umbrella, that where things like the Fabians, for instance, introduced this using language in a specific way to get people thinking differently. I mean, it's very interesting, like all aspects of how we are naturally have been scientifically, or very carefully, not scientifically, very carefully investigated, and they've tried to reroute the way we think, so that the conspiracy theory being attacked and being called a conspiracy theorist in reality often is you're a conspiracy analyst. I mean,
I now take it as a badge of honor when somebody calls me that.
Sure, you're analyzing something that's obvious. Conspiracy just means that two people are doing something behind the scenes and, in the cloak of darkness. That doesn't mean that it's not right.
Look what's coming out. Look what's coming out with now with the JFK assassinations, right? So, and there's all kinds of things like that. But
yes. Yes.
Well, what we want to do. So, Susan, what we want to do is I'm going to go through about a dozen or so predictions that he made in 1958.
Okay.
Right out of the Blue Book. Okay.
Okay.
And I want the listeners to determine whether or not it's going on now. Matter of fact, I'll tell you if they are, and darn well they are. Okay. All the ones I have listed that he had in his book, and I went through that book page by page, highlighter by highlighter. I think I just built new highlighting companies because so I'm going to go through all of these. And
and this is 1958.
1958, Suzette, this is when the book was put out. Remember, that book was a manuscript of what he read in that December meeting in Indianapolis in 1958. Okay. And
one of the first things is the communists are simultaneously and equally gaining control of organizations like the UN.
Well, that's what he said back there. It's on page 19. But by the way, I reference all the page numbers too. Okay. So you can't call me a conspiracy theorist. Yeah, well, the UN, he cited but other organizations. And if you go back to the episode I did on Marxism, I talk about the globalist organizations like the World Economic Forum, the WHO, all these other organizations. There's tons of them now. Okay. The more prominent ones are those I just mentioned and others. And these organizations, Suzette, all have the same globalist, communist bent to them. Okay. And I talk more about that in that other episode. But he is absolutely right. And let's just talk about the UN Charter, for example.
Okay.
All members, this is right from their charter, okay? Now, picking on the UN only because he mentioned the UN. All members shall settle their international disputes by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered. Also, it says in their charter, all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force. Let's talk about who's in the UN. Afghanistan, Cambodia, Cuba, Congo, Iran, Iraq, Laos, North Korea, Russia, Syria, Venezuela, Vietnam. How most of those, if not all those countries, are communist, okay, or some fashion of communism.
They were then anyway.
Okay, well they are.
1958.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying though, they're in now. So his prediction was these are equally gaining control of such organizations like the UN. And this is today now. This is who's in there today. Okay. So how can you have North Korea in there? How could you have Russia in there? How could you have Syria in there? Cuba in there? Okay. Iran in there. Look what Iran's doing now. Okay. So, okay, let's just check that one off. He was absolutely right. Okay. So that's number one. And again, we mentioned the World Economic Forum, right? That in the Davos manifesto, they even use the word manifesto, where Klaus Schwab says China is the country that we all need to model ourselves after. Okay, they're not even hiding. Well, they're not even hiding it anymore, Suzette.
No. I remember the first time I heard that was John D. Rockefeller in his biography.
Mhm.
And the other guy was Henry Kissinger, who was our Secretary of State under Nixon. They thought that they were totally like mesmerized by how the communist Chinese were able to control billions of people. And they thought this was fantastic.
You know, during the Nixon administration, I was just a teenager, and back then I probably know 1/1000th of what I know now. I already had Kissinger nailed. I had him pegged. And okay, number two, one means of the communist is to make socialism sound appealing, and above all, make it seem inevitable. Okay, it's on page 20.
Yes.
Now, I just happen to go with our socialist extraordinaire that so many young people today are clamoring around, and that's Bernie Sanders. Let's go to his website. I went to his website, and let me just check off the things he's all for. Abortion. And by the way, every one of these, most of them anyway, are unconstitutional. Abortion, the Green New Deal. I call it the Green Raw Deal, by the way. Medicare for all, college for all, expanding Social Security, housing for all, free childcare, elimination of medical debt, tax on extreme wealth, income inequality tax plan. I love that one. Empower Puerto Rico, and gun safety. Okay. Safety's in quotes, by the way. And so that's Bernie's platform. Okay. How the heck we're going to pay for it? I don't know, but that's socialism to a T. And this is what the youth are all about when they see all this free stuff. You know, I had a niece that said one day, well, education's free, so we don't have to worry about that. I go, where 70% of my town's budget back in Connecticut was going to education. Okay. None of this is free. And here's the argument. When you say free, I want free healthcare. Well, then here's how I think about it. You're asking doctors to work for free. Somebody's got to pay them. Oh yeah, by the way. What's that called though? It's called slavery.
Yes, and if you and just calling healthcare, this is near and dear to my heart. Is it really healthcare?
No.
Or is it disease management?
No.
And what are the options that the provider can offer you? What's included in the insurance?
Obamacare had nothing to do with quality of healthcare. It just had to do who's going to pay.
Yeah.
That's all.
And you know, so healthcare is really what you do for yourself day in and day out.
Yep.
And that would be worth teaching children to do. And, you know, when you think of how kids are brainwashed into thinking these things are, you know, actually a good idea, you don't have to look any further than the government schools. They're getting
a lot of people look at things like they look at Sweden all the time, right? And I've been to Sweden many times. It's a great country. And they say, well, you know, they're socialists and look how well they're doing. Well, first of all, Do you know that even the most lowest paid worker in Sweden pays 60% in taxes?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
We're here, the 50% of the bottom half don't pay any taxes. Okay. Now, then they point to Venezuela. They say, well, Venezuela, that was not well done and all that. I loved what Trump said. The problem in Venezuela is not that socialism has been poorly implemented, but that socialism has been faithfully implemented. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what the tyrants wanted. They nationalized the oil industries. Basically, just took them away. Okay, and that is the tenets of communism when they own all means of production. Okay, number 3. He said on page 21, American foreign aid has been a tremendous help to the advance of communism. Okay. I just mentioned all these countries. I'm going to go over them again. Each one of these countries, Suzette, we have given foreign aid to. You ready for this? And read it again. It's the same list I read earlier. Afghanistan, Cambodia, Cuba, Congo, Iran, Iraq, Laos, North Korea, Russia, Syria, Venezuela, Vietnam. We've given foreign aid to every one of those countries. Oh yeah, by the way, one that's not on the list, China. We've given foreign aid to China.
Let's include Ukraine.
Oh,
Ukraine
yeah.
has
Oh yeah,
received
absolutely.
$77 billion as of December of 2023. That's 9 zeros.
That's what we know.
Over 77 billion in foreign aid. And where is that money gone? We sold them our outdated wares. I mean, the last shipment of what are those cluster bombs that have been outlawed? Well, we sent them cluster bombs. They look like baseballs. They were outlawed because they didn't want little kids picking them up. But we sent those to Ukraine because we didn't have any 50 caliber rounds. Apparently, that's what most soldiers use, right? That's like the mainstay of the artillery. I'm not a soldier, but that's my understanding, are 50 caliber rounds. We ran out of 50 caliber rounds because the military industrial complex makes luxury weapons. So they make something like the Patriot missile system, for instance. And the Patriot missile system is very, very pricey. Each battery, so that's like the actual apparatus that shoots the missile, and the missiles themselves run about 1.1 billion in total. So a single missile, to shoot one missile, one Patriot missile, costs $4.1 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they take a long time to make. So you can't like just pump them out like
Well, that's a good point. I'll tell you right now, because here's the deal. We're 4 years in arrears on what we promised Taiwan to defend against China when they do attack them, by the way. And matter of fact, I don't know if you noticed this, but just the other day, yesterday, our Navy ship is moving into Taiwan, and China's starting to, okay, so they're going to go after that because of the semiconductor that's a subject for another day. But, the thing about this is, because we're giving all that funding over to Ukraine, when the munitions that we should be giving to Taiwan, and we're 4 years in arrears, it's not like, hey, go order 5 more hamburgers. Okay, to make a Stinger missile takes a long time, and the procurement process in the Department of Defense is unbelievably bureaucratic. Okay, and how that works, and I know how it works. I won't go through it now, but it's you can't just say, oh yeah, let's just make 100 more Stinger missiles. It doesn't work that way. Okay.
So in this case, to stay on using the military industrial complex as an example, this is foreign aid. So these systems are sold to Ukraine, but they get the old system. And now the new company like Raytheon, or not the new company, but the new system is then the money that is supposed to be foreign aid to Ukraine is actually going to Raytheon to make the new systems.
It's a new purchase order.
So it's
like the 85 million left in Afghanistan is a new purchase.
So is that fascism or is that socialism? It sure as hell is not, excuse me for saying that, but it's certainly not a constitutional republic that would do that.
No, that's exactly right. And we don't have any interest in Ukraine, and that's a big argument, but we can maybe get into that some other day.
Yeah.
Number 4, by the way. So we're giving foreign aid even to China, our adversaries, Cuba, Russia, Iran, and Iraq. Okay, mind-boggling. 4, the American people are being persuaded that our danger is from the outside, presenting foreign aid as a means to oppose communism. Well, there you go with your comment about Ukraine, Christy. Okay. Now let's look at what our buddy Mr. Biden said about.
Suzette. It's Suzette, not Christy. You
Can I
just
call
call
you
me.
Christy again?
Yes, it's okay.
Let's do this whole episode over. Okay. I'm so used to seeing Christy there.
No, it's okay.
So please correct me every time I do that. The White House budget, President Biden's message in this year's budget. You ready for this? Now, remember, this notion here was people are being persuaded that our threat is from the outside. Here's Biden's message. In addition, the budget cements our commitment to confronting global challenges and keeping America safe. Think about that. It's exactly what Robert Welch said in point 4. It outlines crucial investments, strengthening our military, fostering democracy. There's that word again. We had a whole section that we're not a democracy. We are a republic. And fixing our immigration system, etc. Yeah, right. And so that is in concert with what he said back in 1958, persuading us that our threat is from the outside. Keeps our focus off the guys on the inside. Okay. 5, greatly expanded government spending for military and foreign aid. Okay, so let's go back to what we just talked. That's on page 22. The White House budget in 2023 is 6.3. The White House budget, the federal budget, is 6.3 trillion. It goes up in 2028 to $8 trillion. Okay. Now, this year, the IRS took in, or last year I should say, they took in 4.9 trillion. I know it's hard to do numbers over the airways this way, but we basically have to come up with another $3 trillion in taxes to beat this budget in 2028. Good luck with that. Okay. And let's remember that the military industrial complex, that there's no money in peace. And by the way, a lot of the spending that we did, Suzette, in Iraq and in Afghanistan was off budget. Now, our military budget is about 800 billion, but that's just to keep the military running, right? All that stuff, trillions of dollars, was off budget. Okay. Higher number. Oh, go ahead.
They never talk. No one. Remember how Congress used to talk about a balanced budget?
Right.
We don't hear that anymore. There's something called FASB. FASB's 59 or.
Yeah, Financial Accounting Standards Board. Yeah, FASB.
Yeah, it's like this off the book. It's like having another set of books.
Yeah.
Like if you did that in your business, you'd be in IRS prison.
You'd also go to jail if you handled your pensions the way they handle Social Security. So you go to jail.
So anyway.
Well,
Fancy
okay.
accounting.
Higher and much higher taxes, page 22 in the blue book. Okay. Oh, let me go back to the White House budget, to the federal budget. Tax receipts 4.9 trillion, like I said, and it's going to go up in 2028 to 6.4 trillion. Although they want to spend 8 trillion, so we got already right there $1.6 trillion deficit. Already, they're planning for this deficit. They're planning for it. Okay, so the founding fathers tied economic freedom. I'm sorry, tied your wealth and your personal property, which is money, to your freedom. Right?
Exactly. If you live in a country where you're taxed on your income. Now, there's one thing to be taxed. I guess they're called apportion taxes for gas, for instance. So we pay a gas tax because we all drive on the roads and we have to, share in that. So we have this apportioned tax from gas that's supposed to go to keeping our roads and bridges, our infrastructure running, and all the things surrounding that. But income is your labor. And when Woodrow Wilson introduced the income tax and established the IRS back in 1913,
Yep.
the tax started at 1%. And they wanted to soften the blow for the average person. So they said, well, rich people will pay 5%. And very quickly, by the time he had us in World War I, the taxes were as high as 65%.
And you know that, and we talked a little bit about this on one of the other episodes, is that the people wanted it. Most Americans want it because they duped them into, everybody thinks this the fair share, you got to pay your fair share is a new term. They were using that back then to convince the American people on the income tax. Most people wanted the 16th Amendment. Okay. So, when you look at the higher taxes, that's exactly what's going on. And again, number 6 was higher and much higher taxes, page 22 of the Blue Book. Guess what? Check that one off for Robert Welch. Okay. 7, his 7th point, an increasingly unbalanced budget, to your point, despite the higher taxes. So here is the budget deficits from 2023 to 2027 that projected. They're projecting this 1.4 trillion, 1.6 trillion, 1.8 trillion, 1.7 trillion, 1.5 trillion. They're projecting anywhere from 1.3 to 1.8 or 9 trillion dollars a year in budget deficit. They're planning, Suzette, they're planning this. It's not like, oh, we overspent and we screwed up on our budget, right? They're planning this. Now, that money's got to come from somewhere. Either they're going to get more debt, or they're going to print money and just make inflation go through the roof, because that's the definition of inflation, or we're all going to get taxed up the yin-yang, which is probably going to happen. So they're planning this. It's not like they're even hiding it, okay? And our freedoms are tied to our economic wherewithal, and that is by design, these higher taxes. And it ties back into the military industrial complex, and also ties back into this fourth branch of government with this unbelievable billions and billions being spent unconstitutionally, and transfer payments.
Well, and having a private bank that you can borrow money from, that the Federal Reserve, right? Privately held bank.
Well, look, I'd love to have a business where I can just hit a button, create money, and then lend it out and take the interest back as income. I mean, I'd love to have that.
Right.
Business,
it's a crazy. So there are a lot of people making a lot, insane amounts of money. The greed factor, there's actually a way to measure greed is off the scale.
Well, we are going to do a separate, you and I talked about this earlier last week sometime, that we are going to do, Suzette, a episode on the Federal Reserve, at least one on the Federal Reserve. Okay, There's so much to talk about there, and we will get that. We will get that in the queue as we move forward, because there's a lot to talk about. Number 8. So I'm going to check number 7 off as, yep, Robert Welch is right. Boy, for a conspiracy theorist, or 1958, he must have had a crystal ball, maybe he went to high school with Kreskin or something. I don't know. Probably the young people don't know.
He did graduate high school at the age of 10.
This is true. Maybe he went with high school.
Some people see things immediately, and they're very patient with those of us that need to be shown it again and again and again.
You're not one of those. Okay, number 8. Hey, look at this one. Wild inflation of our currency.
There it is.
What do you think about
Look at that graph.
Yeah, we're looking at a graph right now from Investopedia, which you guys probably can't see. I know you can't see because we're not showing it. But, once we got off the gold standard back in 1972, and by the way, the gold standard is a whole nother episode, how that was orchestrated all the way back from Wilson on the way through to FDR, all the way through to Nixon, and how we got off the gold standard, okay? But the gold standard basically limited how much money we could have in the money supply. And once that was gone, everybody says, well, how come all the prices went up from the 1970s? It's because of that. The definition of inflation, right? As we talked about, inflation of our currency. And I talked about this in the constitutional economics episode, way at the beginning of this thing, one of the earlier episodes, Suzette. Inflation is an expansion of the money supply. The more you have of anything, the less valuable it is. Okay, and I use automobiles. I use tomatoes. If there's a lot of tomatoes out there, the price goes down. If there's not many tomatoes out there, the demand's higher, the price goes up. Okay, so now when I add more money, money's no different. When I add currency to the money supply, there's more of it and it's less valuable. And it's chasing less goods and services, right? So that's the definition of inflation. And again, number 8, page 22 of the blue book, wildly inflation of our currency. I've got to check that one off. Okay, that's a plus. That's another check mark. Boy, this conspiracy theorist was really lucky, wasn't he?
He was one smart cookie, no question.
Yeah. Number 9.
Amazing insight.
Government control of prices, wages, and materials, supposedly to combat inflation. Now, let's think about this. The Federal Reserve prints all this money to quell the appetite of the federal government. They have no vested interest in not to do that because they make money when they print money, okay? And now they get to charge it out at higher interest rates because they raise the interest rates because they want to bring down inflation that they created, okay? So think about that model. And again, I'll get into this more another time, and I did mention this earlier in another episode. The Federal Reserve is 12 independent banks, 12 independent corporations. They're not government entities, but the president appoints all of the officers of these banks, okay? So in that sense, they are controlled by the government, but they are independent corporations, and 12 of them. I happen to be at the one in Cleveland. I had a lady that used to work for me, got a job there. And I took a whole tour of the Federal Reserve in Cleveland, saw them burning piles of money that were outdated money, pallets and pallets of currency going to the furnace. I'm like, can you guys just let me grab a handful, you know? They had a shooting range there, okay, a shooting range for their, yep. I saw the biggest safe in the world. Is in that Cleveland Federal Reserve, which is and by the way, offices and people everywhere. I don't know what they do all day, but it's packed with people, right? So anyway, I got to see that. It was kind of cool to at least see that. But anyway, does government control prices? Absolutely. Remember Nixon and how he tried to control prices? Wages, they're trying to control wages. Well, we do control it, right? Sometimes we'll tell a farmer, hey, you can only charge so much for a bushel of whatever, corn. All right, well, screw you. I'm going to go make soybeans, right? Now there's a glutton of corn, a shortage of corn. So every time the government gets involved in the free market against Adam Smith principles, if you will, we have all kinds of consternation. So number 9, check that one off, okay? The minimum wage, we could probably get into that more detail some other day, but it's probably, as Thomas Sowell says, one of the more racist things that you could do to Black Americans is have a minimum wage. 10, greatly increase socialistic control over every operation of our economy and every activity of our daily lives. I talked about this in the 4th branch of government, Suzette, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens of unconstitutional agencies. Okay, some of the more obvious ones are Department of Ed, EPA, OSHA, CDC, okay? And they are, through their, and again, I'll just summarize that episode. When they write regulations to enforce their charter, they have the power of law. Well, guess who these agencies report to? The executive branch. And for those of you in Rio Linda, that's the president. I have to go back to Rush Limbaugh again. I miss him so dearly. And 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 so that means the president is writing law. So goodbye checks and balances that the framers put in. Good. I mean, there's a list of unconstitutional agencies that go on forever. Okay.
Well, and when you look at, when they begin these, like the Department of Energy or the EPA or the Environmental Protection Agency, these are all things that we naturally are thinking, yes, this is good. We want to protect our environment. But then they do stupid stuff because they don't know what they're doing. They're bureaucrats in luxury offices. They have no idea what's going on in some of the areas that they're regulating. Think of the Horizon oil catastrophe that BP had in the Gulf of Mexico under Obama. I mean, they were cleared by the EPA. I'm pretty sure it was the EPA that allowed them to drill there. Yep. And it was a disaster. And we don't, so these are things that I think are not very useful, these agencies, because somebody gets an idea that they're there to keep us safe, but they don't fulfill that. Where if you were an independent business that had to ensure, if you were the driller and you had to ensure that what you were doing was safe and clean and that you were responsible for any mess up, maybe you would be a lot more careful. Does that make sense?
It does, but I will take it a step further and say, whether you like the idea or not, whether you think you'd like to be protected in that regard or not, if it's not constitutional, it belongs to the states for the 10th Amendment. Okay. So the EPA, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that we should have our hands at the federal level in the environment. There's nothing that says the government should control the airwaves. There's no with the FCC. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the government should control education. Okay. So whether you think it's a good idea or not is not the issue. The issue is it constitutional? Okay. And now, if it's not, it's got to go to the states per the 10th Amendment. So again, I want to say that one is absolutely right. Number 10, he gets a check mark, along with number 11, huge increase in the size of bureaucracy, both in cost and reach, which ties back into this previous one. Okay. And just think about the fourth branch again, all these agencies and the cost. And Biden's taken he took the Department of Education up to 600 billion. It's coming back to 200 billion during COVID. It went to 600. $200 billion for the Department of Education. And our education is going down the tubes. Okay. We don't belong there.
With the permanent state is the administrative state employs about 2 million people.
Yeah.
2 million permanent people which is why nothing changes when the president changes. You expect, it used to be that, when you got a new president, you got to know everybody else. You got to.
I just think they should just lay people off and not hire them again. But
yeah.
Well, so that's number 11. He's right about that. Size of bureaucracy. And 12, far more centralization of power in Washington. Again, going back to all of this, it's the states are now losing their power, which is number 12, and 13, the practical elimination of our state lines. So the whole idea with having states was that we were going to have, in a sense, they treated them as independent nations. And these independent nations set their own agenda, their own constitution, as long as it wasn't in conflict with the federal law, as long as the federal law, the Supremacy Clause says the federal law is supreme law of the land, provided it is in concert with the Constitution. Okay. Actually, they use the word pursuant thereof, which means if the laws have to be constitutional, then it's the law of the land. Okay. Well, the practical elimination of our state lines is happening in that regard. Okay. Because no longer, the more federal control you have over all your different laws and what have you, the more being in one state versus another is irrelevant. Okay. And that's what's happening here. And again, I'll refer the listeners back to one of our episodes on nullification and what our state representatives have an obligation to do, not just a right, but an obligation. So again, I got to check off 12 and 13 here that he was right. Both of those
Yeah.
come on page 22 of the Blue Book. Okay, and by the way, the very first bill that Congress put in and the Senate put in the 117th Congress was voting law, taking voting law rights away from the states. Okay, it passed. HR 1 passed in 2021, but it did not pass the Senate, thank God. Okay, but every time they're going to come back with that bill. All right. So, and then there's a Real ID Act where they want everybody to have a national ID. Well, this has been kicking around, and George Bush, W. Bush signed it into law in 2005. But the states collectively, like 10 or 12 states, pushed back, and they have not done it yet. So you ever see when you're traveling, if you travel enough, you have to get your federal ID by October, or you won't be able to travel. And all of a sudden that goes away, and now it's the next year. And it's the next year. Okay. So this keeps getting pushed back. But again, the practical elimination, and by the way, I'm only giving a couple examples here. The practical elimination of our state lines, again, I got to give Robert Welch a check mark on that. He got lucky again. Okay. And by the way, we do have a federal minimum wage, going back to this whole business about controlling prices. 14, the steady advance of federal aid to and control over our education system, leading to a complete federalization of our public education. Bingo. That's a check mark. He is absolutely right on that one, page 22 of the Blue Book. And again, the Department of Education, as we just indicated, and hearing Biden say things like, we're not going to give any federal aid to schools and school districts who have rifle programs for their kids. Really? You know? And so they're using you as a blackmail. When I was up in, I don't know if I was up in your way, but when I was running for Congress, this lady said to me, Mark, if you eliminate the Department of Education, where are we going to get our money from? I work in education. I go, well, where do you think the Department of Ed gets their money to begin with? From you. For every dollar you send them, you might get back 60 cents if you behave. Okay.
If you behave.
Okay. You got that? You know, right?
Yep.
So again, number 14, hey, Robert Welch got lucky again. Isn't that amazing? And by the way, this is where the Department of Ed went up to 600 billion during COVID, and now it's back down. I'll be okay. Under Trump, it was like in the 50, 60 billion range. It's going up to 200 billion under Biden. 15, the last one I have here, the willingness of the American people to allow the steps of appeasement by our government, which amount to a piecemeal surrender of the rest of the free world and the United States itself to the Kremlin-ruled tyranny. Page 23. Okay, well, let's start looking at the World Economic Forum, as you and I talked about earlier. Okay, and their ruler, I call him a ruler, Klaus Schwab, and how communist China is the model that we need to follow. And Mr. Biden says globalism, not Americanism, guides his policies. Okay, so
his campaign slogan, not to interrupt, "Build Back Better," is directly from the World Economic Forum.
yeah, exactly.
I mean, that didn't come from Camilla or him. You know, that was just cut and paste. From
Well,
the
if it came from Kamala, it probably would have said something like this: we need to build back better simply because we need to build back better.
Oh gosh.
You can't make that stuff.
Oh no, I'll be nice.
Christine, Christine, oh my God, I did it again. I'm gonna get this right by the time.
It's okay. It's okay. You guys worked on this a long time together, so no worries. You'll remember it's me.
Yes, I do, Suzette. Okay, look at, I picked 15 items out of that book, which are the major ones that he predicted, and he's 15 for 15.
He's right. He was right. He saw it coming. He saw the beginning of it. I mean, during that time, communism was a real threat. people were concerned. There was an American Communist Party that was established in the early part of the 20th century, I think like 1918 or something, and they outlawed it. President Eisenhower had an anti-communism law. The whole, communism was a concern, and whether that was, he saw that for sure.
1950. Yeah, exactly. And by the way, the communist movement started at Yale University in a real way, in Connecticut, in New Haven, Connecticut. And William F. Buckley Jr., who is, some argue, the father of conservatism, who two of my good friends, Jack Fowler, who actually is the co-host of Victor Davis Hanson's show, and another friend in Connecticut, were mentored by him and good friends with William F. Buckley Jr. And William F. Buckley set up his office like right next to the communist office, just to torque him, right? And William F. Buckley, though, did have a falling out with the John Birch Society when Robert Welch claimed that Eisenhower was a communist. And that's where they had the falling out. They were in concert in so many things. And it's too bad that they couldn't stick together in that regard. But anyway, William F. Buckley Jr., who is a real, we need to do something on him too. And matter of fact, a good friend of my friends who knew him well can tell me, they have told me stories that you're not going to read anywhere else about William F. Buckley Jr. So it's live and well. He had this nailed. I wonder what Robert Welch would say today. He died in 1985. So, I wonder what he would say today about what's going on. Probably more of the same, but his vision's coming through. And I think by the time he died, Susan, I think he knew he was right. I mean, come on. So,
I'm sure he did. I think he would say, "I told you so. I saw this coming like 50 years ago." And actually longer than that, 65 years ago. So yeah, it's the trajectory is not that difficult to see when you have a bird's eye view. And I think he did.
I think with technology, as you and I talked about the other day offline, it's happening faster now. And it's more complex now. It's not as easy to follow with all the electronic transactions, all the shenanigans going on with the Federal Reserve and how we move money around the world and create money and all of this. So it's happening so fast right now. And you get into derivatives and all these other high-tech financial instruments that, you really have to know a lot about them to even be able to follow them. It gets so complex that it's just going over everybody's head, and that's a real problem. But I think the lesson from this is, Robert Welch, John Birch. I'm a life member of the John Birch Society. I think their heart's in the right place, and they're great constitutionalists. I think the lesson here is pay attention here, okay, and don't dismiss anybody who's accused of being a conspiracy theorist, as Robert Welch was, right? And we didn't even get into Senator McCarthy, okay? I mean, there's a whole nother thing we could talk about with him, but I believe McCarthy was right, okay, although the way he went about it was wrong, the way he accused people and all that. But anyway, I really think that we need to take a pause and just question everything, Suzette. Question everything. Even if your most favorable politician, question everything, okay? And hold their feet to the fire when they abridge the Constitution. As much as I love President Trump, he should not have been the guy to set tariffs. That's one of the enumerated powers of Congress. 17 enumerated powers, Article 1, Section 8. The president should not set tariffs. He's not supposed to. Okay, that's Congress's job. Okay, Biden cannot attack Yemen or any other country. Obama attacked, I think, 9 or 10 different countries, including Libya, and didn't go to Congress for authorization. And I love how these people say, "Oh, that's not really war." Go back to Webster's 1928 dictionary and read the definition of war. It is war, okay?
Take a look at Libya before and after.
Exactly.
Libya was a marvel. I mean, we may
They made
not.
a mess of it. They made
He
a
was,
mess.
you know, Gaddafi was a dictator,
Right.
but the country had a very high standard of living, very high education level. They were very wealthy because of oil. And they kept,
argue with Saddam Hussein too in Iraq as well, because yeah, he was a tyrant, he was a dictator, but what do they have now? What do we trade one for another?
yeah, he was brutal. I mean, all of these, we could say that about our own government, unfortunately.
Yes, we can. So
You know?
I think the lesson here is question everything. You know,
Question
when
everything.
you see a guy like Robert Welch come along, you know, don't just dismiss him. Listen to what they have to say and do your own research, right? And really find out what's going on here. So I owed it to Robert Welch and the John Birch Society to, in a way, vindicate him, okay, because he was right. I want to tell you, he was right. And if anybody disagrees, please let me know, okay? I'd love to hear about it because, you know,
Yeah, what are we missing?
what are we missing?
I mean, is
The
there a
Blue Book is
parallel?
only, yeah, the Blue Book's only a couple hundred pages long, and I read it all many times, and I haven't seen anything that he missed. So,
Is there a parallel universe somewhere that we're missing?
oh yeah, there is. There definitely is. Yes. Yeah, we'll have a UFO episode maybe down the line. Who knows?
You've lived in Scottsdale too long.
Oh, tell me, yeah. Well, we got some UFOs here, let me tell you, and they have two legs. So, um, anyway, last words, Suzette. Your first episode, you did phenomenal, and I look forward to doing future ones with you. Welcome to the team, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. It's been fun. Okay, bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Episode 16, Constitution Solution, one podcast under God. God bless America. God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Constitution Solution, one podcast under God, where we hold that strict adherence to the Constitution is the solution to most of our country's problems.
You can find other episodes on our website at 1787solution.com, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and most other platforms. We're your hosts, Mark DeLuzio and Suzette Lawrence. Until next time, may God bless you and may God bless America.